Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Sober Yoga Girl podcast. I'm really excited to be sitting here with Zach Spowart. And Zach and we like weirdly got connected through this girls traveling Facebook group. I posted something about like being sober and being in Bali and loving the Middle East. And someone commented who I don't know who it was anymore, being like, you sound like my friend who is also sober and also lives in Bali and also loves the Middle East. And I was like, okay, I like have to meet this person. And so we got connected. And Zach, I was looking at Zach's social media and it's so cool. So he's created Nomadic Addict, which is a basically an online platform, and started a blog that's to promote sober traveling and adventures, which I just think is so amazing and cool. And so I wanted to have him on my show to hear more about his journey and his story and what he does. So welcome, Zach. How are you?
Yeah, Alex, thanks for having me. No, this is awesome. Yeah, when I heard your story and the way that you found out about me and we connected, I was equally as intrigued. So really, really glad to connect with you and the work that you're doing. I'm doing great. Just happy to be visiting with my folks of all places, even though I'm based out of Bali, like you mentioned. I find myself in sunny California right now, and some time with the family is always a good thing.
It's amazing. And I'm also at my family's right now, at my mom's house. I'm in my childhood bedroom, which is the podcast studio.
Nice. Yeah, the
Yeah.
podcast studio. I love it. Yeah,
And
amazing.
so we were chatting before we started recording the episode, but Zach shared that you're 16 years sober, right?
Yeah, November 28th, 2006 is my marked sobriety date. So 21 years
Amazing.
old when I got sober. Uh, hey, look at that. It's a really good time to get sober, a really bad time to get sober. But for me, it ended up being a really good time. And to start off, I thought it was the end of the world, but turned out to be the beginning of a whole new world. Not to, well, I guess hashtag Ariel there, but it was a beautiful, beautiful way of life. Yeah, very, very grateful.
Amazing. Oh, that's awesome. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about like your journey before sobriety. Like, what was your childhood like and your story?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I grew up, middle of three kids, older sister, younger brother. I was kind of the first to probably get into some substances, but I was always sort of drawn towards them. I don't know. I was like the good kid drawn towards the bad things, if that makes any
Mm,
sense. Like there was just that curiosity and intrigue of like the mystery of the other side, so the football practices and the doing the homework and the rigidity of the good grades and everything was not super. I wouldn't say super fulfilling. It was. I always had that intrigue. Like my next door neighbor got me to smoke cigarette when I was 13, and it was just kind of the hidden, feeling like a badass or something at the time. I don't know. Something about it always grabbed my attention, and then wanting to have a little bit of drinks to, I think, lean into that. But yeah, so I grew up, sort of, my dad's a doc, my mom's an artist. I showed you my mom's art studio just before this. It's actually where I'm sitting in right now, at home here. Great, loving people. I don't have a sob story in that regard. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for people who do. But my story is not that. I mean, my story was a very loving, caring, providing family that, we definitely had our dysfunctions. Don't get me wrong. We weren't perfect, but, a couple glasses of wine at dinner and all that. There was nothing, there was no major like abuse or anything crazy. It was just that. But I struggled a lot with anxiety, and I think that's a huge part of my story that really, really launched me into a space of wanting to self-soothe and wanting to find ways to kind of be at peace with myself. And anyways, not going too far down that road, that was really what kind of led to my drugs and drinking, which I know we'll talk more about on this. But yeah, my upbringing was, pretty good. A little bit of sibling fights here and there, but a little bit of family vacations, that sort of stuff. But
yeah, amazing. Thanks for sharing. And so when did you start like getting into drinking? What was your like teenage years like?
yeah, so almost went right into that on that last question, but I wanted to leave space for the next one. I was joking with you, Alex, before, short story long with me here. I'll chat a lot, but so I started drinking probably around 15, 16. And when I noticed my anxiety started getting really heightened, I would get so anxious that I would actually throw up. It was
Wow.
almost like my body's physiological response of like the world, like whatever I'm experiencing is so much that I can't take it. That it's like, this release of of, I don't know, the burden of life, I guess. For a 15-year-old, it sounds comedic to say, in all honesty. I think it's fine to make light of it in some regards, but also to honor anybody else's story that's out there that could be struggling with the same thing. But so much of what was going on was just the lack of awareness of what was happening within my body. And I think if there was anything that, I wish, no regrets or whatever, but, I wish for anyone out there, I wish for, could have been a little bit more normalized or explained to me at a younger age, was just what anxiety felt like and what was going on. Because it's one thing to be nervous, it's another thing to have like crippling or debilitating anxiety that actually, like, I get literally go walk down the hallways in high school and like throw up in a trash can or something. Like, that's to the point where it's actually a disability, where it's too. I'm not, I'm having a hard time just doing daily normal activities. But I made it worse. Drinking made it better, but I also made it worse. And I didn't learn about this until I got sober too. The laws of physics here or whatever, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So for as much as I choose to drink down my feelings and suppress those emotions, there's an equal and opposite reaction of that same anxiety that manifests later in terms of panic attacks and what have you. So that was something I didn't learn until later, but definitely from 15 to 21, when I got sober, it was sort of my like career drinking. And it was primarily founded upon like trying to find a sense of self and leaning into, just some degree of like, there was a girl at the time that caught my attention that was a big drinker. That'll happen, right? Your sort of first love. And, you get caught up in whoever you're attracted to and what they like, and trying to conform to that persona. But I'm not a victim of anything, right? And sobriety teaches me that today too. That was my own decision to participate in that. But it was serving me. Like, I would drink and my brain would calm down, and I was at peace. So I felt like, oh, cool, I drink and everything's going to be okay. And that lasted for a little bit until it didn't. But that was my only coping mechanism for life. So when we get into chatting about, how and why I got sober, that was the main catalyst. Was, the alcohol worked until it didn't, and when it stopped working, it really stopped working, and then something had to shift.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks so much for sharing that. And I feel like at this time, like even the time when I was growing up, when I was a teenager and in high school, there just was very little education around mental health. I don't think there was
Oh
I
yeah.
actually don't think there was anything about mental health in high school. I think I learned about it in university when I had to take like a psychology
Mm-hmm.
course. And even then, like, I was only because I was doing a Bachelor of Education. It was like a requirement to get the degree. Like, it
Exactly.
wasn't like a common thing. And there were so little resources available that, you find something that works, which is alcohol, and you're like, okay, well, this is the answer then, rather than actually get to the root of like, okay, how can I work with this without a substance?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And at the time, 15 years old, when it first started happening, I mean, everyone was doing the best they could. It's one of my favorite lines that I've learned is, everyone's doing the best they can with what they got. And it really takes the pressure off of just about anybody that I interact with. But, my mom and everybody, everyone just wanted to help, including therapists that didn't necessarily know what the right thing was to do, or putting me on prescriptive medications. I believe they were all just trying to help me, but getting me on Klonopin or some of these benzos that kind of just perpetuated the problem.
Yeah.
Looking back on it now, it's like everyone was doing the best they could. I do genuinely believe that they all wanted to help. Nobody's at fault. It's just the way that the cookie crumbles as it goes, right? So,
Totally.
but
Yeah.
yeah.
And so then what happened like over that time between like age 15 until 21? Like, how did your drinking accelerate?
Yeah, it was definitely exponential in nature for a bit. I started with just a little bit of drinks here and there. Obviously at 15, 16, my parents were pretty strict. They're a little bit old fashioned that way. It was pretty hard to stay out late, live in a relatively remote kind of area. So trying to commute back and forth, it wasn't like you could just walk outside and crawl out of the bedroom window and go to these parties. You're like 20, 30 minutes removed from town. And so it makes a lot of noise coming into the house. And, my dad's a light sleeper, always on call as a doctor. So it wasn't easy. I had to do a lot of tricks. I remember lining up 4, 5, 6 excuses just to buy myself an hour, just to get myself a little bit of time. But yeah, most of it centered around some hidden opportunities when I could. Eventually, I found myself skipping football practice and doing some of these things to go drink and party with my friends. But the acceleration of the drinking came, I think, synonymously with the acceleration of my anxiety. And
Yeah.
as the anxiety worsened, my desire to drink and calm those
Yeah.
nerves, also increased as well. And I'm not trying to blame it on the anxiety, right? But I do recognize that as a large precursor, and reason for my use, and it's a big part of my story for that reason. But yeah, and the whole idea of tolerance, needing more to achieve the same desired effect,
Yeah.
became very real and alive for me. Of like, okay, like I have to drink more to get to the same base, and then the more I drank, the worse I felt. The worse I felt, the worse the anxiety got, the more I needed to drink. So it was this, like, again, this perpetual cycle of like, okay, I really need to figure out how I can get this under control. But there was no figuring it out because, again, like I mentioned, there was any doctor was giving me benzodiazepines, which is a tranquilizer, more or less, or if you're not familiar with that, a calming agent that's prescriptive medicine that's highly addictive and will also make anxiety worse without the medication. Uh, so yeah, I would drink more hard liquor. The girlfriend at the time, I was dating, she was really big on that. And so when we'd get together, we'd drink a lot. And she was an only child and lived in a space where her parents were okay with it. So that was a safe space for me to go and drink. And as long as we didn't leave the house, there were some enabling opportunities, right? Such as
Mhm.
life. There's a will, there's a way. You'll find a space to be able to operate the way that I wanted to operate. And so I did that. But as a result, it got worse and worse. And my parents tried some early interventions. They found some hard liquor bottles when I was 16, and I was losing weight because of my anxiety and because I wasn't able to hold down food very well. And I was getting kind of pale and sickly looking, drinking more and being anxious and not really feeling like I wanted to eat a lot because my stomach was so upset. So my mom intervened and tried to get me into a treatment program as early as 16. But a 16-year-old kid who's barely been drinking, I don't know, it was a very, very hard for me to think that I was alcoholic at that age. Like, it was pretty hard at 21, but by the time it progressed to that point, there was much more there. A couple DUIs and a minor in possession. I had an accident and injury with my little brother. He had actually fractured his neck in a car
Oh my
accident I was
goodness.
responsible for at 21. Yeah, oh my goodness, right? Like I blew
Wow.
a .180, blew a .26, and that was a result of, just fast
Wow.
forwarding through the story, being being on the benzos, being on the Klonopin and blacking out at the wheel. Like I'd driven drunk many times, and I'm not proud of that. But I told you I'm an open book because I want people to know, that stuff happens, and I'm super blessed, as is everyone else that I came encounter with on the road, that I didn't get, like, nothing worse happened. It's crazy to think that that was who I was, and I take full ownership and responsibility for that. And I've done my 5-year felony probation. I've done my jail time. I did, 4 months. I had 1 month credit served, and then the remaining 3 months of house arrest at 21 as part of my sobriety story. But yeah, there was a lot of reparations that had to be given. There was a lot of restitution, as it were, given back to sort of pay my dues. But yeah, that was my story with my little brother, and going to jail and blacking out at the wheel, and that was the main catalyst of, like I had said before we started the recording, it was almost like my higher power, who is a part of my recovery. For those of you listening out there, if that sounds too magical, like, no worries, I totally get it. But the idea of the universe or something guiding me or something redirecting me, or just bad luck, whatever you want to chalk it up to. I call it actually good luck, because it redirected me. But push me to get sober and led me down this path of, like, a lot of legal interactions at a very young age, which kind of forced me to shift my focus and direction. So I kind of took that question and ran with it. But anyway, it gives you a bit of an idea.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Wow. And thanks for being so vulnerable because I'm sure that some of those things are not easy to share. Like definitely talking about some of the drinking and driving things. Like I know that's something that can be just like super vulnerable to share, but I'm sure there's people that are listening who that's part of their story too, and it helps release some of the shame when you hear parts of your story and other people's stories and know that you're not alone in it. So
Absolutely. Yeah, I was chatting with a gal recently who just trying to do like some sober support. And yeah, and she, driving under the influence with her kids in the car. And the first thing I do to her is like, I don't want to enable the behavior. I don't want to say it's okay, but because that's certainly not anything that, I think societally and understandably any of us want to accept that would be a thing. And on the same token, that's also something that people that struggle with alcohol addictions or recognize themselves as alcoholics, it's kind of what we do. And so, yeah, like none of what I did was okay. I want to make that very clear. I'm very aware of that. But on the same token, I'm also very aware that like I'm grateful that nothing tremendously horrible happened. My brother, by the grace of God, he fractured his C1 and C2 vertebrae. He could have easily been paralyzed from the neck down, if not completely, passed away. He had a full recovery, and he, in and of himself, is sober now over 10 years. So we have kind of this dual brotherhood, not just by blood, but also through our sobriety and our recovery, which is pretty rad. But anyway, I definitely have empathy for people going through that because I know deep down, I'm a big believer that deep down, or even at the surface, all of us want to be our best selves. All of us want to push the shopping cart back to the spot it's supposed to go. All of us want to, pay for someone else's coffee in the Starbucks line or whatever and pay it forward. I really believe that there's so much good that lives within all of us. And it's just tapping into that and what is our best selves, our higher selves and our higher calling is something that unfortunately I think the drugs and drinking robs us of. And it's oftentimes driven by the burdens of life. In AA, they say life on life's terms. And I don't know, maybe that sounds too enabling, but I don't know that that's anybody's fault. There's a lot of societal pressures and there's a lot of baby steps taking us off of the road that we were maybe called towards. We find ourselves way over here one day, wondering how we got there. And through responsibilities and obligations and debts and whatever, there's a lot of pressure attached to that. And I think it's okay to just stop and pause and recognize that, like, hey, it's all right that like you happen to find yourself in that space. One of my favorite quotes is nothing is good or bad. Nothing is good or bad. It's thinking that makes it so, from William Shakespeare. And it's our own attachment to what's occurring that leads to that situation being good or bad. So if we can just honor that space as it doesn't have to be good or bad, it just is, then we can operate from a space of like, okay, cool. Like, how can we get ourselves back to where we want to be? Because that's really what it's about. If you want to be over here and you find yourself here, okay, it doesn't have to be good or bad. It just is. And you're here. And like, how can we get baby steps back that way? So that's kind of the approach I take with my own self healing. But also, of course, for other people who are going through what they're going through as well. Like, okay, like there doesn't need to be any shame around that. We just somewhere along the way found ourselves taking these steps, maybe to self soothe, maybe because there were some societal pressures, maybe there were marital or relationship pressures. We find ourselves in toxic relationships oftentimes, wondering how we are doing these things that we thought we would never do. And one day you wake up and you're here. And it's really just about trying to get back to where you want to be.
yeah, love that. So when you went through like this accident, this must have been, was this the catalyst for you for your sobriety?
Ooh, Alex, yeah, I want to say that I like was woke up and I'm like, oh my God, I need to change. My life is not going the way that it was supposed to or that I wanted. And this is why I'm okay saying I'm alcoholic today. Some people really have an aversion to that word, and that's cool. Like, I mean, I'm not here to push that word on anybody. You do what you want to do around your own terminology. We talked about sober, curious, and alcohol free and whatever, right? To each his own.
Yeah.
I got sober through AA and a sponsor. So, excuse me, that's part of my story. But yeah, I think for me, the catalyst was, it was primarily that. But as one of my counselors said at Hazelden Betty Ford, which is where I got my addictions counselor degree, gosh, almost like a decade ago now. He used to say like he got sober because he had a back problem, and I love that saying because it was like the lawyers were on his back, his parents were on his back, the courts were on his back. It was like he had a back problem, right? And that was my situation. I didn't wake up with this moment of clarity, this spiritual experience at all. I woke up in jail wondering like when I was going to get out. And I remember asking the person like, hey, I don't understand. Like, why can't I go? The first DUI, I woke up and you let me out. Like, how come the second DUI I don't get to? And I remember him just looking me in the eyes like, dude, you're in jail. Like, this is like, it was like to him, it was really simple. Like, you're an idiot and you got into a car accident that you're responsible for. You shouldn't have done that. And you're in jail now. And I was waking up like in this super entitled, enabled space of like, release me, like I'm free now. I'm sober. Like I slept through the night in this padded room. Like it doesn't work that way, man. And I remember like, beginning to make sense of like, oh, there are consequences, negative consequences for my actions. But sad to say, that wasn't the major catalyst, although it was in some degree. The very first thing I did when I was released from jail was another guy that had a DUI that was released at the same time. We walked right across the street. We got a couple 40s and we drank. And then I called my parents and I said, "Oh, said no one else to pick me up from jail at the time." And I said, "Oh, they just released me. Hours later. You have to come get me." And my parents, being the loving, borderline codependent, enabling people that they were at the time, of course, dropped what they were doing at 2 a.m. and came and picked me up. But it eventually became a catalyst because of all the legal stuff that I had hanging over me, the consequences of my actions. And that's why I said I'm really grateful for that, because at 21 years old, I wasn't in a position to get sober. And my life would look drastically different today if it wasn't. So I'm super grateful. But yeah, in some ways that was the catalyst, but not of my own volition or desire. It was definitely the back problem scenario, the 5-year felony probation. I ended up getting a lawyer who was like, "Hey, you need to go to treatment. You're alcoholic," and me going to treatment, and then none of that being enough. Right? I was like, okay, I did inpatient, I did outpatient, I did 3 years no license. The 5-year felony probation, all that stuff. And after that, after 1 year of living a life sober and not getting in trouble anymore, and things being just better, that was my true catalyst. That was when I was like, wow, like I can have good relationships with family members. I can have good relationships with friends. I can not be wondering if I'm going to get in trouble when a cop pulls me over. Like I can do the right thing, like quote unquote right thing, like the legal thing anyways. And like this is a possibility. It's funny, like almost never even occurred to me that was a possibility of a way to live life. I would baby step my way off of sort of the path in some regards. That was the catalyst. All of that hanging over my head, and a long-winded answer for your question.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Wow, you went through so much at such a young age, like leading up to that, like the moment in which you got sober.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, I think it was a lot. But I think we all also go through a lot. Again, like because like we talked about before, it's like everyone has their journey, everyone has their story. For some people, it's going to look drastically different around their familial bring like the way that they're brought up. Trauma, abuse, physical, domestic, sexual. There's all sorts of different ways. Some people, completely taken advantage of financially. Some of it's all the above. Some of it's none of the above. Some people are just like, hey, drinking was something I enjoyed and it worked. And then one day it just stopped and I started losing friends. And we're all part of the same club, I guess, of like, hey, we just are looking to live life in a better way, I think. Maybe not even better because that goes against the whole good or bad thing. It's just, I don't know. For me, like we talked about before the show, I just am really about promoting like living the life you want to live today. It's so big on like tomorrow is not promised, and that doesn't mean to live foolishly, right? Of course we have our responsibilities, we have our obligations. If you have children, you got to save money, and you got to pay for their schools, you got all that stuff. And like there is this element of like waiting until one day I will do this, one day I will do that. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
that just for today saying really hits home for me because tomorrow is never promised. And like, to draw some of my diving career and my sober diving career into this, as an example, a lot of places are being closed down. A lot of animal interactions are being shut down, and opportunities to do some of these dives are disappearing. And opportunities to engage in these wonderful experiences are disappearing. I had a really incredible, borderline, if not complete, spiritual experience diving with sperm whales in the island of Dominica in the Caribbean. And a friend of mine was asking me about it. I started helping them look into permits, and they're already heavily regulating that. And it was pretty regulated, but they're getting it to a point where as early as 2024, the common person like me and you, unless you're involved with National Geographic or something, might not be able to do that ever again. Isla Guadalupe, which is a place we used to go, the best location they had to study great white shark behavior. They were doing tons of ocean conservation and awareness around that. They've shut that down as of 2020 or 2021. Can no longer go and have those experiences anymore. And you can name off a ton of things. This is just my ocean conservationist awareness piece of it, but there's small examples of it's very easy to think like, oh, I'm going to go do that one day. And I can't do it this year, but I'll do it in 2 years when I have more money, or when my kids are in school, or when I'm out of the relationship, whatever the example is, when I finish this career, right? And so much of my recovery has taught me that, like, don't live foolishly, but live opportunistically, for sure, around like, hey, just for today, like tomorrow's never promised. And pay attention to those universal cues, like, I'm here today. What does here for me look like, and what can I embrace in this moment that is given? Yeah, it was long-winded
Wow.
as usual.
No, I love your long-winded answers. You drop so much wisdom in your shares. And I was thinking as you're sharing, I was like, gosh, there's so many things you've shared that make me think of like components of yoga philosophy. And
Yeah, totally.
yeah, are you a yogi? Like, have you looked at yoga philosophy, or like do you know
A
a little
little
bit
bit
about
of
it? Yeah.
a little bit of yoga exposure. I need to do more, to be honest. I did triathlons for a bit, and yoga helped prevent a lot of injuries.
Yeah.
And then when I stopped doing the triathlons, I kind of stopped doing yoga. But I have leaned a lot into breathworks and meditation, mindfulness, and then pranayama, things of that nature, a lot of breathworks
Yeah.
orientation. So there is the overlap there.
Yeah.
I would like, my dad and I were just talking about this earlier today over coffee this morning, but I would like to get more into the stretching and the yoga. And I've done some of that because it's the benefits of that are tremendous. I stand by them 100%. I'm a little bit of a hypocrite there because I'm not actively practicing.
Yeah, but that's okay because like your yoga practice doesn't actually have to look like the poses or the asanas, but there were just a few things that you shared. I do yoga sutra study, like yoga philosophy study, as part of my community, and there were a few things. I'm trying to remember what you said. There was one, the "nothing is good or bad" Shakespeare quote, which I have to get from you because that
Yeah.
ties into like a concept of from yoga philosophy as well. But there was something else that you just shared there, which it's just the idea of the fact that that like nothing is guaranteed, and we can't
Yeah.
predict like when we're gonna live, like the beginning or the end of our life, and all we can control is like what we do in each moment that we're alive, like in each breath. And so really just like embracing the moment and the
Yeah.
opportunity to do the things that you dream of.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, what was my next question for you? I remember. Okay, you're sober. Okay, yes. Okay, now let's talk about your sobriety. So what was it like being
Sure.
like 20? Okay, what was it like being, this was my question, was we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, of being sober at such a young age, like at age 21, and going through, like, were you already in university or college at this point? And like, what was that like?
Oh my gosh, my university career is looks ridiculous. I have been to, I think it was a total of 7 or 8 colleges, including junior colleges. Yeah, yeah. I've tried to put your transcripts together for that. It's a nightmare, but it's literally it's ridiculous. But that was part of my journey, bouncing around, trying to find the right space. A lot of uh, my journey came through an attempted healing through geographic means. And I believe in that. There's an element of nature versus nurture that I believe is real. I don't buy into the whole like, wherever you go, there you are. I'm 100% bought into that. Like we carry ourselves with us. And that's also the 50% nurture standpoint. The nature is the environmental standpoint. And that has an equal play as well that I think it's overlooked sometimes. I like to say that, like in the scenario of like if you take a Hawaiian and you put them in the North Pole, they might have a different outlook on life all of a sudden. And it doesn't mean that the person themselves, who might have been 100% grounded, doesn't take away from that. It just means that their environment wasn't conducive to match the nurture, the portion of themselves that is part of their calling, part of their passion, part of who they are. If they're water creatures drawn to the water and you take that away from them, that's taking away a part of themselves. And so I found that in my geographics and in my travels, and obviously is currently existing in my nomadic addict, adventures in recovery and nomad life that I've leaned into as I've gotten away from the 9 to 5 stuff. But oh shoot, I totally just ADD'd on myself and forgot your question. You're gonna have to bail me out here. You
it
gotta
was
help me.
it was about being sober at like a young age.
Perfect. Thank you. So if it was getting sober at a young age, yeah, I think for me, I scattered around. Yeah, it was through university. Thank you for bailing me out there. So I attempted to figure out where it could fit for me. Right, I was like, oh, maybe I'll try an EMT job over here at this junior college, and I started at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. My dad was like, just pick a major. It doesn't matter what it is. And so I was agriculture business of all things because I wanted to go to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and I researched the highest likelihood of applications accepted, and that was the one. And so ag business it was, and obviously it lasted a few months, and realized that wasn't for me. I wasn't in a state of mind to lean into that, and my friends were at the junior college that was locally there, and so I tried that. But when I started school, to try to answer direct to your question, I was smoking a lot of weed. That was my crutch. That was my substitute for when I wasn't drinking. A lot of my friends were, quote unquote stoners. And I grew up in Monterey, California, a beautiful area. I was getting a call there. Grew up in Monterey, California, where there's an opportunity to, kind of go on hikes and go do all these cool things. And so in any event, but there's kind of a big weed culture here. There's probably a big weed culture everywhere, to be honest. So I don't know if that's an excuse or anything, but I leaned into that. I did a lot of that, but everywhere I went, that was wherever you go, there you are type deal. And everywhere I went was, I was in that space of like, okay, what am I doing? I'm trying to find something. I'm trying to grab onto something to be worthwhile for me here, to catapult me into this new existence. And none of that took hold. And so as I continued to work through that, my progression, I understand it as a disease of addiction, but if you don't buy into the disease model, you can break it down to dis-ease. Living in a space of not ease, like I'm not enjoying, a consistency of living. I'm enjoying or not enjoying rather a increased uncomfortable state of consciousness, really, like and then a displeasure around that led to more and more substance use to try to get back to that state of okayness. As I was chasing that around the world and the different universities, it took me getting sober in Los Angeles and those events that I mentioned earlier to actually move to that space of like, oh, okay, like this is what life can look like. And I relearned through AA how to be a student. And I relearned how to live. They say self-esteem is built on esteemable acts. Well, what's an esteemable act? Well, I mentioned it earlier, something as simple as like returning the shopping cart to its designated location. Maybe you're at a yield and you wave the person ahead of you, or you help somebody cross the street, or whatever. These things that we already know, that I believe deep within us, we already want to do. It's we get away from it because there's, again, societal norms or just caught up in ourselves. A lot of times, I don't even think it's intentional. Matter of fact, I would bet, the small fortune I've created here of my life, my small savings, on 100% that it's not intentional. There's so much going on in our minds. It's like, how do we, that's where that saying of stop and smell the roses comes in. Like, you have to have someone tell you to do that, or we don't do that. Birds are chirping all around us all the time, but do you ever notice them? It's this weird sense of like, oh wow, like the birds are like really loud today. Are they loud today, or is today the day that you chose to hear them?
Mm.
Anyways, I'm going down a side tangent there too, but it's just the awareness of living. And am I caught up in myself because of the burdens of life weighing me down, or am I slowed down enough to hear what's going on and listen to the world around me and respond to it accordingly, and recognize that, like, just for today, I'm okay. Even if I'm not in a space of comfort, I can be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And that's a skill and an art that I think is not taught in our schools at all, that I really wish was taught in our schools. And that goes back to my 16-year-old self, forgiving my 16-year-old self for doing the best that I could. And the catalyst for my sobriety was that, like, not like thinking that I had to be okay all the time, but we get to a space of life where all of a sudden life burdens start to pile on us, and our coping skills may or may not be in a position to respond accordingly in a fruitful manner. And if they're not, then we'll respond in an adverse manner, which was my panic attacks, which I'm not totally immune to today. I'm 37 years old and I'm still 16 years sober. I'm not trying to pretend that I have all the answers. Like, life on life's terms, as they say in Alcoholics Anonymous. Like, it's life still happens. I went about 10 years without a panic attack, and then one day I it just came back, and I still do grounding techniques, and I still have to practice that every day, and have forgiveness for myself, for my body just showing up the way that it chooses to show up today. So yeah, very aligned with the yoga stuff that you're talking about. Very in line with the sort of the Balinese lifestyle. If nobody's been to Bali, I highly recommend. You'll start talking like this a lot. It's just kind of inherent. I think it's in every coffee shop. Like,
Yeah, that's
something
so
that's there.
true. That's so
But
true, actually. I was like, he just seems like a yogi. Like, I wonder if he practices, but yeah, you live in Bali, so we're just like surrounded by
there's,
it.
there's that element of it too. And I think drawn to that,
Yeah,
you're drawn to, once you get a taste of it, it's like you're drawn to this way of life
totally,
that's just like, man, this is it doesn't have to be so crazy. It can be
totally,
so much calmer. And I
totally.
left LA, I left Orange County for that reason. One day it just hit me. There's too many lanes of traffic. There's too many lights. There's too many noises. There's too much advertisements. There's too much stimuli for me. And knowing that about myself, it's triggering my anxiety. And my baseline
Mm.
stimuli is just constant, 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 constant. So I'm always here. And if I want to be a little bit more chilled out, like, I can, that's a nature versus nurture thing. Like,
Yeah.
that environment for me was a little bit more triggering than, say, another environment would be. And so, to thine own self be true is another one of my favorite quotes. I think also William Shakespeare. And it's what I like to encourage people to do too. Like, hey, just know yourself, listen to yourself, and be true to yourself, and it's all good, and it'll work out. And so I don't even know that I talked about my university stuff. Just to hit on that, all of that led to, and I shared with you before we started that, like, as I got into my master's in business, as I got into my
Yeah.
master's in addiction counseling, as I started going to school, I just was true to myself, and because of the foundation of that, I wasn't afraid anymore. Faith over fear, and you can have faith in yourself. It doesn't have to be in some magical, overarching God or something, or faith in the universe, whatever. I just had faith that, like, look, to me, I need to protect my recovery and myself, because I believe that there's a life out there waiting for me. I just have to walk the steps to go get it. And so I would tell everybody, as a protective mechanism, like, I'm sober, and
Yeah.
I don't drink, and my friends that were my friends supported that. And if anybody didn't want to be my friend as a result of that, that's fine. It's not my business to have everybody like me, right? It's just my business to protect myself and the life that I'm trying to build and create. And so that's the crux of what got me through my university. Just owning myself as myself, communicating that way to other people, and letting them know, like, hey, I'm I'm sober today. This is a part of my life, and this is what I'm doing. And then just allowing people to come to me or not come to me as a result of that, trusting that, energetically, energies will match, and the people I'm meant to connect with, I will, and the people I'm not meant to connect with, I won't. And I've made some amazing friendships as a result of that. People that are not sober as well. Most of my diver friends are not sober, and I'll travel the world and do these amazing excursions with them. And so it's really cool. And nobody judges me. Nobody gives me a bad time if I'm not having a beer over tacos in Mexico. Like it's just is what it is. Like just Dak doesn't drink, and you move on, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty simple. So I did the same thing for university in my very, very long-winded answer to that question.
Awesome. And tell me about like, okay, what you do now. So you are living nomadically and traveling, and you've started this super cool Instagram and blog. And like, what is your dream for Nomadic Addict in the future?
That's a cool question. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I'm actually in a space of trying to figure that out. Nomadic Addict for me just started as a name that just kind of hit me when I woke up one day that I thought was kind of had like a little zing to it, but also resonated as kind of who I am. Like I'm nomadic in nature and identify as an addict or alcoholic, and some people again have an aversion to that word. I don't, so I use it openly and freely because I don't see it as a terminology that has to have a shame attached to it. It's just as simple as me having blue eyes or brown hair today. Like it's just a piece of me out. And so my hope is Nomadic Addict will be a number of things, including some of what I talked about already. I would love for it to be a motivating platform for people, an encouraging platform for people. I'm very big on mental wellness. I don't want to do dishonor to my first master's degree in addiction counseling with a focus on co-occurring disorders. I've done counseling 5 years, direct clinical care with families. I've done some interventions. I've done a number of things in the treatment care space, in the direct care space. And I want to honor that. I've started doing some YouTubes. I haven't launched them all yet, but my goal, my purpose is to be a mirror and a reflection to people of things that they already know, but through communication like this, through platforms like this. I'd love to sponsor some trips. I don't know how I'm going to do it. For my 37th birthday, I had some Southwest miles. I did a 50,000 point giveaway from just some miles I had accumulated for someone, and I'd love to do more of that. I'd love to sponsor yoga retreats. Maybe get some people going to your retreat. That couldn't otherwise afford to go, and support and encourage that. Because I know what that healing can do for people. And so in a perfect world, Nomadic Addict could become a 501c3 or a charity or something that has enough fundraising behind it to provide these interventions, to provide these scholarships, and to provide some of these travels. Maybe some sober trips. We talked about that too. People seem to be asking me for that. I should probably listen if people keep asking me for it. So some education. I don't really know, and I'm really excited to find out. And that's how I live my life today, is just like, my sponsor in AA, who doubles as a mentor to me, says faith in the simple definition is not needing to know. And so just living in that space of like, I don't know, but I know that I want it to be something. And so I'm putting energy into it. And I'm hopeful that by methods of like meeting people like you or doing things like this and putting myself out there more, that hopefully I can connect with people. I just need to figure out what that can look like. I mean, it might even turn into something as, it's not groundbreaking, but maybe some sober coaching, or maybe some education, maybe some curriculum around that, maybe some means to be like, what does it look like to be a nomad and sober? I don't know. Sky's the limit. Maybe someone on this show will give me the answer. That's a beautiful thing. You just never know. So maybe someone will reach out and tell me what I'm supposed to do with it. You just go just along for the ride.
That's amazing. That's so cool. Well, I love that about actually like that about your page, is that when someone sent me your page and I was looking at it, I was trying to figure out, I was like, what does this guy do? Like, and I like looked at your website and was like looking at your Instagram, and I couldn't find it, which made it clear to me, like, he's just doing this because he loves it and it's his passion. Like he's just, it's literally just like, I encourage you to travel sober, and you're not doing it to try and make money. You're not selling anything. You're just like sharing your life with the world. And that I thought was really cool, because usually there's like some kind of, like for me, there's a business behind it. Like I'm sharing what I love, but I'm also like, do my program, do my retreat, and for you, it's really
exactly.
just like, this is what I love. And I think that's super cool.
Yeah,
It's
thanks,
super
Alex.
cool.
Yeah, it's how I've started it, and that's where I hope it will stay. I mean, that said, like, I love that you've married the thing that you love as your passion, and also can double it with your way to make a living. I mean, I think
Yeah.
ultimately one can only hope to be so lucky. Presently, I'm in a position where I work in some digital content space around
Yeah.
addiction recovery. In operations, I'd mentioned that to you with the company called Kind Content, where I can oversee operations for writing, editing, and publishing blogs and web pages. And that serves enough for me from that standpoint to fund my passion project like Nomadic Addict. But I don't know. One day it's possible that that will lead to be its own thing. I kind of hope that it will. Although I like what I
Yeah.
do on that area as well. But yeah, that's where it started. This is that's a passion project for me, and I kind of like that there isn't the pressure of
Yeah.
having to have a financial gain from this, because right now it just feels really good to me to just operate from that space. And so I appreciate you sharing that and saying that. That means a lot.
Yeah. It's super cool. Okay. I have
Mm,
one last question for you, which I like to ask everyone,
perfect.
which is if you had any wisdom or advice for someone who's listening to this show who wants to get sober but like hasn't taken the first step yet, what suggestions would you give to them?
Man, I've been getting this question a lot lately. It makes me think I need to go back in time a little bit more and rethink what it was like to get sober at a young age.
Yeah.
I kind of forget like what it was like. Sometimes, yeah, lots of power to you guys out there. Just speaking to you guys that are listening. In my story, understandably, probably sounds ridiculously far fetched. This idea of being able to go swim with sharks and meet these incredible people, and I swam with Ocean Ramsey and Juan, her husband, of all people, and in the Maldives. I mean, it's like a dream come true. I mean, these opportunities that show up as a result of sobriety and recovery is just insane. I mentioned that not as a flex, but it's just like this, anything is possible. I flew helicopters for 2 years. I didn't even tell you about that. I mean, like there's like what you can do in this life is insane when we give ourselves the opportunity to just do it. But I also recognize wholeheartedly, without going down that road, how like if I was listening to me right now in my early stage, I'd probably think this guy's like out of his mind. Like it's just like so far out of left field. Like, just what is he talking about? Like it's just so far. Like if I'm actively drinking, I'm talking about flying a helicopter, like doing these like fancy trips. It's ridiculous. So I want to honor that space too, because I do forget how hard it is to have that mindset and the baby steps of like if I'm trying to be over here and I'm way over here on the other side of the screen, I'm going to the limits of my screen here, like that's a long way to go, and it can look very, very daunting, almost like walking into a desert, not recognizing that there's an oasis at the end where you get to have replenished. Like if all you see is the desert, it can be extremely disheartening. This idea of just the sun beating on you, and this analogy of just getting beat down. There's no hope in sight. There's no way that I'm going to ever find any water, which in the analogy obviously is, your hope of a better life. Um, and that's the hard part. How do you find faith in a period where there's none? How do you find hope in a period where it seemingly is hopeless? And um, so it's a really, really powerful, beautiful, and really good question, Alex. I think the best thing I can offer is that obviously people like you exist, people like I exist, and motivational speakers, if you listen to any of them, oftentimes come from the lowest depths. I mean, I listen to guys like Les Brown and some of these other guys that Eric Thomas, that were just, their stories are incredible from where they started and where they've gone. And so much of sobriety stories are talk about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And so you hear that a little bit in my story here as a result of this or in this podcast, was what it was like. I wasn't doing anything when I first got sober. And while I was kind of blessed, ironically, with the forced legal aspect of getting sober, there is an element of, if you just start taking baby steps, if you just start walking a different direction, it's like when you see these before and after photos of the people that lift weights, right? And it's always like, well, I could never do that. Well, you can. You really can. And it's so hard to accept that sometimes. I think for some people, and I understand the fear attached to that too, future expectations appearing real. There's a lot of acronyms for fear. Another one is, face everything and recover, or F everything and run. Do you want to face everything and recover, or do you want to just say, F it, I don't want to do that, and I want to run away? That aversion to the discomfort. Like, no one, if no one's told you, change is not easy, right? To anyone listening, it's oftentimes very hard. Les Brown has this quote that I love. It's like, if you do what's hard, your life will be easy. And if you do what's easy, your life will be hard. And you probably heard me mention a ton of quotes in this podcast because I'm a big believer that my mind is a sponge, and anything I put into it is what I'm going to get out. And so I don't watch horror movies today. I don't watch these horrible, like, these things that impact me negatively. By all means, if you guys do, go for it. But I don't do that because for me, it impacts me negatively. And I want to live a different life. So I listen to these positive things, and they just pop into my head, and they pop out and things like this. And so when I go through a tough time, it's just right there. It's just my little tool belt in my brain of things that pop in, and I just grab it and I go. So that's I think the crux of what I would offer. And yet another long-winded answer for you would be, for those of you out there listening, like, tap into that. Like, find speakers, find audiobooks. If you like reading, read. Like, find the books that provide you inspiration and motivation to create a launching platform. Like, I don't know if you ever, like, been stuck any way at all, or you've slipped on the ice or something, but if there's any analogy there that works, like, you got to have something to get you a foothold, to get some traction, to get you moving. And what that looks like is as simple as going on a yoga retreat with you, or a little bit of, maybe it's an AA meeting for somebody that just needs to get out there. Maybe it's treatment if you really can't break the cycle and you need to go to an outpatient program or an inpatient program. That's totally okay. That's part of my story. And I've worked with lots of people that needed to get sober through treatment. Tons of people get sober that way. You got sober through an online platform, as well. And there's a lot more of those coming up. Sober coaching as well too. There's lots of different avenues. Taking that first step, having a mentor, is a key to success. Sometimes in AA, that mentors are called sponsors. That's all it is a mentor. Somebody that's there to support you. In your case, if I go to your program, you're a teacher. You're a mindfulness teacher. You're teaching me things. Like, a guru just means teacher in a different language. So it's all words of the same thing. Somebody else out there has an idea. They've walked the path before. They're holding a flashlight of, like, hey, dude, I know how to get over here. Just follow me. And I'm sitting there in darkness, like, really? Like, I could go that way? You'll walk me over there? Like, yeah, man, just go right over here. Like, and it's like, that's all you got to do. Just, like, trust the person with the flashlight on the path in front of you. Just, like, go that way. It might seem dark around you, but, like, if they got a flashlight and they know where they're going, like, just go that way. Like, take the pressure off. You know what I mean? Like, don't gotta go walk blindly in the dark.
Oh my God. I'm tearing up right now. I just got shivers. Have you ever done the Mount Batur, the hike and Mount Batur in Bali?
I've done a similar one. I did the Ijen crater in Java, but which was another volcanic one. But I haven't done the Batur one yet.
Okay. Well, I just got shivers because I was thinking of, I do this Sober Girls Yoga retreat in Bali every year. And in my group in January, like, that hike starts at like 3 a.m. and you're in the dark and you're walking with
Mm.
flashlights. And I had this group of like 7 sober women. And anyway, we climbed all the way to the top of this mountain, and everyone like had to take a different path to get there. Like, some people raced the top and some people were slow, and one person took the motorbike. And I'm always at the end of the group, which I love. Like, I'm always like just walking with the person at the back because, like, I'm like, I've been
Yeah.
refreshed, I've done this before. But anyway, I got to the top, and I ended up, like, I need to send you this video, but I just made a video about, the journey to sobriety and how everyone's path looks different, and how, like, climbing the mountain was like that. So anyway, your metaphor about the flashlight and someone guiding the way, it just really reminded me of that. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's literally what they would call in the therapeutic world an experiential exercise, like, which are way more powerful than even communicating. Although that's probably why you drew chills, is that recollection. So yeah, absolutely. If anybody can get out there and do that, you need that hand. You need somebody physically lifting you up. You need to follow that flashlight. So that's beautiful that you had that experience, and I'm excited for you to have more of those with more people following you. In that same light I think it's incredible and amazing.
Well, this was such an awesome interview. Now I want to organize like
Yeah, thanks, Alex.
a diving yoga retreat in the Maldives. Like
Let's do it.
that's my vision.
Let's do it. Absolutely. Yeah, you sure. Any way I can help, let me know for sure. There's lots of opportunities there. Free diving is becoming a huge thing. I know some sober free divers as well that are starting to do some retreats that way. May or may not be something I choose to get into, like we talked about. But so much of free diving beyond even scuba is about one breath and being comfortable with the uncomfortable. CO2 levels start to come up, and being at peace and freedom. There's no bubbles blowing. It's just the stillness and the calmness of the water. It's incredible. I'll go down a whole other rant and rave down there, but it's something I'm sure you would love. And people out there as well. It's very hand in hand with yogi type stuff, and being like in that one breath, one mindset. Breathe up, hold before you come out and you exhale. I don't know. It's incredible.
So cool. Well, next episode, I'll bring you back and you can tell me.
Next episode. Yeah, we'll rock and roll on that one for sure. But no, this has been a pleasure, Alex. Thank you so much for having me. I hope that anyone out there, that you guys got something out of this. And, I'm available just openly. You DM me on Instagram. You can message me on my website. You can, I don't know, I'm not very hidden. So just whatever. I'm there to support anybody in any way that I can. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Zach. This was awesome. And I'll see you soon in Bali, I'm sure.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Thanks so much, Alex.